안녕하세요.
Good morning.
현실 속의 기본소득을 주제로 열리는 제22차 기본소득지구네트워크 BN 대회.
Welcome to the 22nd Basic Income Earth Network Congress under the theme of Basic Income in Reality. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of you for joining us both online and offline. My name is Joohee, teaching in the Department of Sociology of Ewha Women's University, your MC today.
한국에서의 두 번째 BN 대회를 이화여대에서 치르게 되어
It's a great honor for the university to host the BN Congress for the second time in Korea. Now, this university
내미는 것으로 시작된 학교입니다.
was born
그 이후에도
140 years ago as an attempt to support women and girls who were discriminated against in a
즐기시기 바라겠습니다.
pre-modern society. So I believe the spirit of this university is in line with the idea of basic income.
일부의 첫 순서에
Today we have the opening session,
많은 도움을 주신
which is part 1 and part 2. In part 1, we'll listen to the remarks of congratulations from the organizations who have been supporting us actively. We have invited 4 speakers for welcoming remarks, and I don't see the first speaker.
어떻게 할까요? 우리가 다음
It seems he is on his way
모시고
here.
계십니다.
Now we have him just walking into this hall.
기본소득 연구 포럼 대표.
We have Mr. So Byung-hun, member of the National Assembly and chairperson of the Basic Income Research Forum of the National Assembly. He has also served as a co-chair of the advisory committee of the BN Congress. Let us welcome Mr. So.
네, 여러분 안녕하십니까? 제가
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
대학교에 와본 게 아마 한
Well, the last time I came to this Ewha Women's University was 50 years ago.
지금 얼마나 헤맸는지.
So it's been a while and I was lost trying to find my way. My apologies for being late.
전 세계 기본소득 가족 여러분.
Hello and welcome, basic income advocates from all around the world.
수산위원회
My warmest welcome and my warmest greetings to you all. I am So Byung-hun. I'm a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. Currently, I serve as chairman of the Basic Income Research Forum and chairman of the Agriculture, Food, Rural Affairs, Oceans, and Fisheries Committee. Back in 2016, Seoul hosted the 16th BN Congress, and I'm delighted to see the return of the Congress to Korea after 7 long years. At the same time, as co-chair of the National Assembly Advisory Board, I'm particularly appreciative of the opportunity to hear diverse opinions at this event held under the theme of basic income in reality. Before I proceed further, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the co-chairs of the local organizing committee, including An Hyo-sang, president of the Basic Income Korea Network, Kang Nam-hoon, chairperson of the Basic Society, and Yong-hae In, standing representative of the Basic Income Party, and my heartfelt thanks also go to basic income experts from all around the world. As you are all well aware, rapid shifts are taking place not only in Korea's society, but around the world. These profound changes are partially due to distinct socio-cultural factors in each region, but more importantly, they're caused by the ever-accelerating globalization and the resultant breakdown of boundaries and diversification of crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about cataclysmic transformations, forcing humanity to face a new society and a new economic order. The crisis has not been confined within a certain country or region. Instead, it has threatened everyone around the globe, regardless of their generation, gender, and racial background. However, in the process of addressing the crisis, we had to face the cold reality that extreme polarization and discrimination persist in today's global society. Even the most basic human rights have often been violated in the face of economic disparities. Against this backdrop, a basic income can serve as a solid solution to the problems of social inequality and discrimination that exist in our reality. A basic income is also a firm step towards a more compassionate and inclusive society.
평범한 일상 속
Therefore, I'm firmly convinced that a basic income can restore our love for humanity and mark a new starting point towards tangible social progress. And for a basic income to become a new norm in the global society, it's crucial to tap into the collective wisdom of humanity. The 22nd BN Congress will yet another be a historic moment where basic income policies around the world will be shared and where practical and feasible approaches to basic income will be explored in tandem with global partners.
소득 한국 네트워크
Today's launching of this Congress is particularly meaningful in that it's a result of the dedication and efforts of the Basic Income Korean Network and experts in the field, as well as the collective wisdom of the Korean people who support the cause.
못한 것도
We must acknowledge that discussions on a basic income have not been well received in Korea, a country with a deep-rooted conservative Confucian tradition. Nevertheless, through sustained efforts and persuasion by many advocates, basic income is gradually edging ever closer to reality in this country. During the Congress, which starts today, some 20 keynote speakers will speak and give presentation on the topic. I'm looking forward to learning about outstanding case studies and new research outcomes. And as co-chair of the NA Advisory Board, I'll carefully listen to the discussions on legislative challenges. So in light of this, I humbly request all of the basic income supporters from around the world present here today to share their best ideas. In closing, I hope that your stay in Korea will be filled with memorable experiences and that the growth and expansions of a basic income will brighten your future. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you once again for visiting Korea. Thank you.
네, 개회 세션의 첫 문을 열어주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seo, for opening
다음 환영사는
the part one of today's program. The next speaker is was supposed to be Mr. Jongcheol, Director of the Institute for Democracy of the Democratic Party of Korea.
참석하지 못한
It's regrettable that he was unable to make it here today because of an urgent matter in the National Assembly. Let us take a look at the video.
안녕하세요. 더불어민주당
Greetings. My name is Jongcheol, and I am Director of the Institute for Democracy of the Democratic Party of Korea. I'd like to extend my warmest welcome to the experts, scholars, activists, and citizens attending 22nd Basic Income Earth Network Congress.
해소하고
The BN Congress brings together basic income researchers and policy supporters from across the globe.
기본소득 실현
Basic income is the first step towards building a society that ensures a sufficient financial foundation for all citizens.
되고 있다는 점 잘 알고 계실 것입니다.
I believe you're well aware of the very positive results of basic income pilot programs across the globe. The Democratic Party of Korea established the Special Committee on Basic Income, draw up a roadmap for the next 3 decades based on the legacy of Korea's 30 years of industrialization and 30 years of democratization. It is time that we embark on our journey towards a society that meets the needs of each and every citizen for basic income.
정책으로
Through this Congress, we aim to highlight the importance of basic income and propose innovative ideas and policies that will contribute to driving Korea's global framework and economic growth.
긴밀한 소통을 통해
I sincerely hope that this event will serve as a platform for opportunities to actively exchange ideas and insights and seek ways to elevate the nation's welfare to new heights. Thank you very much.
예, 영상으로
That was a video message of his. I'd like to thank him for his great message.
세 번째 은사로는
As our third speaker from the Basic Income Party, we have Representative Jongcheol, who is also a president of the Basic Income Policy Laboratory. She is one of the co-chairs of the 22nd BN Congress LSC, and she's been making contribution to make this place a better world.
네, 반갑습니다. 기본소득
Hello, everyone.
제22차 기본소득
I'm Jongcheol, president of the Basic Income Policy Laboratory and co-chair of the 22nd BN Congress LOC.
뜨거운 여름에
In this scorching summer, and we are expecting rain from today, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all the basic income researchers, activists, and supporters from around the world who have come to our country. My warmest greetings to you all.
지구네트워크 대회
Since the Basic Income Earth Network Congress held in Korea in 2016, for the past 7 years, Korean basic income researchers, activists, and supporters have done their best to elevate the basic income to the forefront of practical politics. From the Gyeonggi-do Youth Basic Income to the National Disaster Assistance Fund and the Sinhan County Sunshine Pension, Korea has struggled to realize a basic income. Thanks to these efforts, Korea is a country with great potential to introduce a nationwide basic income in the near future. Moreover, Korea is a country that has clearly agreed on the idea that a basic income is the right to a share of the commons for all members of the political community and is pursuing new approaches based on this principle. That's why this Congress, themed Basic Income in Reality, is being held right here in Seoul, not other place than Seoul.
기후위기와 디지털
In this era of complex crisis intersecting with climate change and digital transformation, many argue that a basic income will inevitably become a reality in that not so distant future. The very fact that a basic income has emerged as a promising alternative amidst analysis and debates on various signs of crisis holds a significant meaning in itself.
그러나 우리는 여기서
However, we should not be satisfied with the progress alone. We must take it one step further. The slogan at this Congress, Basic Income in Reality, reflects our determination to make a basic income a policy of the present, not just a dream for the future.
우리 모두의 의지
It's also
가장
a
효과적인
call to action to discuss the most effective strategies for implementing a basic income and to do so together.
이번 대회는 더욱 중요합니다.
That is why this convention is so important. Over 4 days, it will serve as a platform for global basic income researchers, policymakers, activists, and citizens to share the academic, social, and cultural achievements of the past few years.
세계 곳곳에서
It will be a place to look at the various basic income experiments and institutionalization efforts that have been tried around the world and to explore the most effective strategies for making a basic income a reality. I sincerely hope that the various presentations and positions that will be submitted to the Congress will serve as a great foundation for the re-emergence of a basic income politics, not only in Korea but around the world. Compared to the speed of our aspirations, progress may have seemed slow, but thanks to the efforts of many individuals, the basic income movement and politics have been steadily advancing step by step. All of this has been made possible by the passion and dedication of those who are attending this Congress.
그간 기본
Therefore, I sincerely hope that this Congress can be a place where we can welcome all those who have been striving for the realization of a basic income in their respective positions.
될 수 있기를
And I hope it can also be a starting point for a powerful leap forward. I look forward to the lively and enriching discussions that will take place over the next 4 days. Once again,
fukushima 오염수 방류가
well, we are expecting the discharge of the contaminated water from Fukushima tomorrow.
준비하면서
And in preparation for this Congress, well, we've been put lots of efforts. It's not just climate change, but for ecological transition. I hope that we can have meaningful discussions because these hold true significance in this age. And I will do my best. I send my heartfelt regards to the 22nd Basic Income Earth Network Congress. Thank you very much.
예, 환영의 말씀 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
마지막 환영사입니다.
Young. We'll now listen to the last welcome remarks.
쓰신 기본소득 한국 네트워크를 대표하는
We have
목사님을 모시겠습니다. 기본소득 한국 네트워크는 2009년
Ms. Han In-jung, the board member of the Basic Income Korean Network, who put together a lot of efforts to organize this year's Congress.
네, 안녕하세요. 기본소득
Good morning.
기본소득 한국
My name is Han In-jung.
한인정입니다.
I'm a basic income advocate and a member of the Basic Income Korea Network. For the 22nd BN Congress,
제 자리에서 보고 느낀 기본소득의 정의와 필요성,
I will talk about the definition, necessity, and possibilities of basic income from my own perspective, because I do not represent all basic income advocates.
될 수 있다고 보기 때문입니다.
I believe this way of telling my own story is the beginning of
그렇게 보면 사실
bringing basic income to reality.
한국이면 세계 도시 중 6위를 차지하는
A few years ago, the phrase "May you be rich" became one of the popular New Year's greetings in Korea. Seoul has become one of the 6 richest cities across the world in terms of GDP. But not everyone in Seoul is happy. The winner-takes-all society. In the winner-takes-all society, wealth is monopolized and inequality is intensifying. Those who have lost their humanity in the extreme competition for survival are complaining of depression and alienation. On top of all the tragedies happening in Seoul, recently there has been a lot of crimes on random people, including the random stabbing in the middle of the day in popular public locations in Seoul. If the government allowed public to carry guns, it would have been a massacre. The criminal said, "I tried to live a good life, but it was not working. I'm living unhappy, and I wanted to make other people unhappy." Evil in him finally prevailed, and he achieved making a neighborhood miserable.
제가 전혀 다른
In the face of increasing the horrible cases, we rushed to close a case, saying that we must punish the devil more strongly. But I'd like to ask, are they really vicious demons? Are they completely different from you? At least I can't say that they and I are completely different. There were many times when the evil inside me actually prevailed. I'm a so-called lucky survivor in the face of a lot of competition. I couldn't plan for a better tomorrow. There was also a time when I was frustrated by the anxiety that I might be one day become a loser. Someone advised me like this: "You are too impatient. You can get away alone and you can walk your own way." I couldn't do that. For me, walking on a cliff, dreaming of a better life was a luxury. The laughter of happy people seemed to make my misfortune more tragic. I was even more lonely in it. This is not just about me. Only a lucky few have the privilege of finding the way and speed of life they want. Now,
수준의 복지를 제공합니다.
this country offers a poor level of welfare.
을 증명하는 과정입니다.
Only when you prove that you are useless. Some people choose to die because the process of welfare provision is so humiliating.
죽음으로써 자신을 지켜내고 불행의 이웃을 만드는 이들이 늘어나고 있습니다.
That is why we are seeing an increasing number of people who are killing others themselves or struggling to lead miserable lives.
하고 있는 이 환경을
This is not
이런 사건
their problem only. We live in a society that influences each other's lives. If we leave the environment in which evil grows as it is today, these tragic events will be repeated. So, I'm arguing for basic income. Basic income finds the share that has been exploited and monopolized in the society. It's the basis for proving useful by everyone's existence, and it allows each person a little freedom to live the way they want to. What kind of life do we live in such a world?
살아갈까요?
I have experienced the reality of having basic income through basic income experiments. Basic income cannot be defined as a policy of just lowering unemployment rates. Basic income is the priming water for happiness. Basic income gave them small freedoms, and each individual was making their own achievements, creating their own happiness.
그 과정을 통해 만들어진 나만의 이야기는 내 안에
Their own stories, imprinted through the process, became a force to beat the evil in them. They were no longer
만드는 이들이 되어가고 있었습니다.
making neighbors of misery, but making neighbors of happiness. We are here today to support basic income. Let's bring about basic income to create a new page of history. Let us bring the hidden people together and commonwealth in one place. Let's give everyone their own rooms and make a song of real freedom and sing it. Even in the winter of despair, spring is already blooming. Thank you.
아주 열정적인
That was a very passionate message. Thank you.
것으로 환영사를 모두
So
마치도록
with that, we'd like to conclude the section where we listen to welcoming speeches, and we will turn to congratulatory messages.
소득당 외에 기본소득의 확산
Apart from the Basic Income Party, we have two other parties, the Green Party of Korea and Democratic Party of Korea, who will share with us their messages. But Chair Lee Jae-myung's congratulatory remarks will be delivered in the last part of the presentation, in the last part of the ceremony. Please welcome Chairman Kim Chan-hui of Green Party Korea. He's been advocating
에서 굉장히 활발하게
the idea of a basic income for a long time.
전 세계에서 오신 기본소득 연구
Greetings to basic income researchers, activists, and global citizens from around the world. I'm Kim Chan-hui, chair of Green Party Korea.
현실 속의 기본소득이란 주제로 열리는
And I'd like to congratulate you on the 22nd Basic Income Earth Network Congress, which is being held under the theme of Basic Income in Reality. And I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the Basic Income Korea Network, and especially to the LOC of this Congress.
제 개인적으로는
I'm personally very happy to be attending the offline Congress for the third time after the 16th Congress in 2016 at Seoul University in Korea and the 18th Congress in 2018 at Tampere University in Finland. I believe that creative and bold ideas for ecological and social transformation will be widely exchanged over the next 4 days. Green Party of Korea was founded in 2012, a year after the shock of the Fukushima nuclear power plant explosion in Japan. In the 2012 general election, the Green Party adopted a basic income for peasants as its platform. As Mr. Kim Jongcheol, who contributed greatly to the foundation of Green Party Korea, had earlier proposed, from an ecological perspective, basic income for peasants is essential to liquidate predatory monoculture agriculture that relies on chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, and to achieve an ecological circular economy. Furthermore, the party adopted universal basic income as a party platform. At its 2015 Congress, in the 2016 general election, the party adopted a universal basic income of 400,000 won per month as its first pledge under the slogan, Breaking the Growth Addiction. In 2020, it submitted a new carbon tax and a national ecological dividend program and basic income in transition, which combines basic income with just transition. The theme of this Congress is basic income in reality. The reality is that the Green Party feels more acutely is the climate crisis, which is heading towards disaster. I believe that the basic income movement faces serious challenges. Andre Gou, who proposed basic income from an ecological perspective, asked in 1972, is the Earth's balance, for which no growth or even degrowth of material production is a necessary condition, compatible with the survival of the capitalist system? Andre Gou saw the planet as demanding equality without growth, and for him, a basic income was the way to go. To address the climate crisis, we need to reduce consumption. Consumption is a key engine in the motor of growth. In this sense, we need a clear indication that the basic income will not encourage consumerism and increase carbon emissions. For a long time, the basic income movement has been characterized by a cohabitation between income-led growth and degrowth, and an ambiguity between capitalist consumerism and post-capitalist orientations. Sometimes this broad inclusiveness has been hailed as a strength of a basic income. But if this ambiguity in the movement continues, more and more climate activists will move away from a basic income. Of course, you might argue the richest 10% of the world is responsible for more than 50% of global carbon emissions. In other words, income inequality has created carbon inequality. So reducing income inequality will reduce carbon emissions, and basic income will help address the climate crisis. That's true, but the climate crisis is far to dire or help to be sufficient. Take the example of the Swiss carbon tax and dividend, which has reduced carbon emissions by 28.1% compared to 28 years ago by distributing 2/3 of its carbon tax revenue, which has increased eightfold in 10 years. That's a great achievement, but to achieve net zero in 2050, we need to reduce carbon emissions by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030. It's this reality that makes the statement a carbon tax collected and paid out in the form of a basic income would help fight the climate crisis sound hollow. If not wrong, how fast and by how much do we need to raise carbon taxes and increase eco-dividends to realistically help stave off impending climate catastrophe? Of course, we know that a basic income is not a panacea, so some might argue, can we blame a basic income for not being able to do what it can't do in the first place? Yes, but here's the thing. What a basic income can't do is the one that is the most imminent, solving the climate crisis. So I think we need to holistically redesign a basic income and the basic income movement to fit the current state of the planet. We've been arguing for a long time about which idea is the best way to reduce inequality and eradicate poverty. And so we've understood each initiative primarily in terms of confrontation, in the form of universal basic income versus universal basic services, universal basic income versus a job guarantee. But if we change the problem to which idea is the best way to enable us to live within the ecological limits of the planet, then the initiative can shift to how to put it together. We shouldn't see the social transition as central and the ecological transition as a side effect, nor should you understand the two as parallel. The ecological transition, making sure we don't exceed the planet's ecological limits, is primary, and we should think about how to make the social transition within those constraints. The most rapid ecological transition requires an active role of the state. Basic income, on the other hand, is characterized by freedom from the state bureaucratic intervention. The state apparatus is merely an intermediary. So we need a new look at the role and the function of the state. Finally, making the public the main actor is the basic income movement. Seems to be the movement's eternal challenge. If citizens remain only passive subjects, or handed cash by policy powers, where will we find the energy to move from a small, partial basic income to a full basic income? If people's autonomous activities are not expanded, a basic income will only reinforce existing social arrangements, as Andre Gall put it. It's only those who fight for a new world that will pioneer new autonomous activities. I look forward to building the world with everyone here. Thank you.
김찬희 대표님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim, for the congratulatory remarks.
4일간 이화여대 ECC에서 오프라인으로
Next, we're going to give you an outline of the BN Congress program that is going to last for 4 days starting from today. We have Professor Baek Seung-ho from the Catholic University. Good morning. My name is Baek Seung-ho, teaching at the Department of Social Work at the Catholic University.
온라인으로 아침에
It's a great
이 자리에 함께 하신
to be with you
대한민국
in the early morning today in Seoul and in the afternoon and evening in other parts of the globe.
이후 대한민국에서
So the last BN Congress was organized in 2016,
이 뜨거운
7 years ago.
와 같았습니다. 성남시 청년 배당에서부터 시작.
And since 2016, the temperature of basic income in Korea has been increasing.
기본소득이 지급되어
In a small municipality called the city of Seongnam, the youth dividend was introduced. So in Korea, basic income started as an actual policy, not a pilot program.
19 시기에
And since 2019, the youth basic income was introduced by the Gyeonggi provincial government. And despite some controversy, during the pandemic emergency, financial assistance was provided to all citizens. In the presidential election 2022, basic income was one of the main debate topics.
실험들이 정부에서 그리고
And there have been many other basic income pilot programs, including
이렇게 기본소득이 현실 속에
rural basic income by both public and private institutions. With basic income approaching our reality,
지금
researchers and scholars have engaged in heated debates.
겨울로 가고 있다라고
Today, it seems that the movement for basic income in Korea has passed through autumn and now entering the winter. Now, the city of Seongnam recently repealed the youth basic income scheme, and the same scheme of the Gyeonggi provincial government is being threatened of the same
대한민국의 시민들은 현실 속의
abolishment.
그야말로 다이나믹하게
As many people say, dynamic Korea, basic income has been experienced by the public in a very dynamic way over the last few years.
다양한 실험들이
As you will learn in this year's Congress, there have been diverse basic income pilot programs in Korea and in other countries. Some of them were successful, others were not very much.
그래서 기본소득 실험과 파일럿 그리고 부분적인 제도의 시행
So, we have witnessed diverse basic income experiments, pilot programs, and partial institutionalization and political progress. However, if you ask whether those programs were what we envisioned as advocates of basic income, the answer is no, I believe. That is why this year's theme for the Congress is basic income in reality.
이상이 아니라 현실 속에서 만난
The theme was chosen in the hope that we can look at basic income experiments in the last 10 years or so to find out a feasible way to introduce basic income in reality. If we really want a universal and unconditional basic income across the globe, we should not just repeating the necessity and rationale of basic income.
분들이
Instead, we need
말하고 고민을
to talk about basic income with the
기본소득이 현실로 내려와
whole of our existence in our lives about why basic income is necessary.
어떠한 대안적 성과들을
What is urgent for us today is to strictly assess
하고 나아가야 될 방향을 고민해.
what happens when basic income becomes a reality.
기존의 콩그레스와 마찬가지로 기획 세션과 동시 세션
What kind of institutionalization it takes,
영어 세션으로
and what kind of political dynamic we observe, and what kind of alternative achievements we can expect.
의 기본소득 운동을 이끌어 오셨던
In this year's Congress, we have prepared more than 140 presentations from speakers, by speakers from 23 countries.
심의를 거쳐 23개
In plenary sessions, we have speakers from 11 countries who have been leading the basic income movement across the globe.
재정상의 이유로
In
번역이 제공되지 않음을 통구스럽게
small sessions, we will focus more on basic income experiments in Korea, where we won't be able to provide simultaneous interpretation due to financial restraint.
주제들과 흥미로운 발표들 속에서 현실 속의
This year,
기본소득 실현을 위한
I believe the participants can explore ways to introduce basic income in reality with intriguing themes and presentations.
엄청나게 열악한 상황.
In any, just like any BN Congress, this year's BN Congress was difficult to put together.
사무국장님께서
The financial restraints have been resolved to a substantial extent thanks to the contribution of individuals and civil society organizations.
했습니다.
the Secretary General of the Basic Income Korean Network and the staff have made a lot of efforts
분들께
to promote and organize the Congress.
그분들의 몫이라고
I believe without them and the efforts of volunteers and the members of the Basic Income Party, this year's Congress would have been impossible. I'd like to extend a sincere gratitude to all of them.
모든 분들께 다시 한번
Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and that's it for the introduction of the program. For more details, please refer to the pamphlet. Thank you.
네, 백승호 교수님 소개 말씀
Professor
감사합니다.
Park, thank you very much for your introduction.
특별한 순서를
And next, we have a very special
대회를 맞이하여
piece of this Congress.
하시다.
Well, we,
하신
in memory of a person who contributed so much to this movement and someone who created the Green Review, we will pay tribute to the late
교수님은
Mr. Kim Jongcheol. He's an intellectual who's been advocating the movement and he walked the talk throughout his life. First, I'm going to share with you a quick video followed by a tribute by Moon-jae, who's a poet. And the title of the tribute is A Revolution That Doesn't Need a Revolution.
예, 안녕하세요.
Good morning.
영상 전에 소개받은
As introduced, my name is Moon-jae.
먼저 이 자리를 준비해
Before I begin, I'd like to thank everyone who made this event possible,
주시는
and I'd like to welcome all the participants
좋은 인사 말씀을
from both online and offline. We did hear some great messages, so I'll just skip the welcoming remarks and I'll move directly into the tribute of mine. I believe that we are living the future before our before our posterity.
가신 지 어느덧 3년이 지났습니다.
It's been 3 years since Mr. Kim Jongcheol passed on.
조계사에서 3주기
At the end of June, we held a memorial ceremony for the 3rd anniversary at the Joohee Temple in Seoul, and today we're honoring him on this meaningful occasion. Today, at the 22nd BN Congress,
새기는 이 시간을
I think this is a time of solidarity and determination to end mourning
미래를 만들어
and
나가자
create a new future with his legacy.
생각합니다. 3년이 지났는데도
3 years have passed,
그리고 실천과 비전을
and I'm not still sure how I can sum up his life, thoughts, practices, and visions with a few words.
잘 아시는 것처럼 선생님께서
As you may well know, he was a scholar and professor in English literature, but he was also a literary
다시 말해서 피를 흘릴 필요가 없는 민주혁명이라고 받아들입니다. 기본소득이 왜 필요한지, 필요하다면 어떻게 이뤄낼 것인지 논의하고 합의를 도출하는 과정이 민주적이라면 그 자체로 이미 혁명입니다. 이 과정에서 시민들은 저마다 민주주의의 진정한 의미를 학습하고 내면화할 것입니다. 이런 성숙한 시민들에 의해 기본소득제가 구현된다면 그것은 그야말로 혁명이 아닐 수 없습니다. 기본소득이 열어나간 새로운 세상을 굳이 길게 설명할 필요가 없을 것입니다. 선생님께서도 지적하셨듯이 시민들은 자기 삶의 주인으로 거듭날 것이고 공동체와 사회는 배려와 존중의 가치를 앞세울 것이며 국가와 국가는 국경을 넘어 호혜적 관계를 이루어 나갈 것입니다. 김종철 선생은 2016년 스위스에서 기본소득에 관한 국민투표가 실시됐을 때 글로벌 기본소득이란 새로운 아이디어에 주목한 바 있습니다. 글로벌 기본소득은 1차적으로는 늘어나는 이민자들에 대한 고려이겠지만 그보다 더 큰 이유가 있다고 저는 생각합니다. 인류가 인류로 태어났다는 사실만으로 지구상 어디에서든 자유와 평등과 존엄을 누리는 것이 글로벌 기본소득일 것입니다. 하지만 이를 가로막는 엄청난 장애물이 있습니다. 바로 기후 대재앙입니다. 전 세계가 글로벌 기본소득을 공통의제로 설정한다면 그 순간 인류 미래를 가로막는 난제와 직면하고 그 해결책을 찾아 나설 것입니다. 그 역도 성립하겠죠. 지구 차원의 재난에 대응하는 방안의 하나로 글로벌 기본소득을 채택할 수도 있습니다. 지역이나 국가의 기본소득 논의가 새로운 사회를 만드는 과정인 것처럼 글로벌 기본소득은 새로운 지구 사회를 건설하는 과정일 것입니다. 반세기 전 동구권의 한 정치 지도자가 이런 의미심장한 말을 남겼습니다. 다음 전쟁에서 살아남는 자는 죽은 자를 부러워할 것이다. 저는 핵전쟁에 대한 경고라고 알고 있는데 지금 우리가 겪고 있는 전 지구적 전쟁 상황에 그대로 적용되는 것 같아서 등골이 서늘해집니다. 그렇습니다. 우리 아이들이 우리를 부러워하지 않는 세상, 미래 세대가 우리 기성세대를 저주하지 않는 세상을 만들어내는 것이 지금 여기 우리에게 주어진 신성한 의무이자 우리가 자발적으로 행사해야 할 떳떳한 권리입니다. 기본소득은 혁명이 필요 없는 혁명입니다. 현실 속의 기본소득을 주제로 한 이번 대회가 물려받은 것보다 더 좋은 세상을 물려주는 글로벌 무혈혁명의 도화선이 되기를 희망합니다. 우리에게 희망이 있는가라고 늘 캐묻던 김종철 선생께 답하면서 이 짧은 혼사를 마치겠습니다. 선생님, 우리에게는 희망이 있습니다. 여기 이렇게 희망의 증거가 있습니다. 감사합니다.
예, 이문재 시인님의 따뜻한 헌사와 함께 그 맑고 드높은 김종철 선생님의 정신이 오래오래 우리와 함께 할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 이제 조금 미뤄졌던 더불어민주당 이재명 대표님의 축사를 들을 시간이 왔는데요. 성남시장과 경기도지사로 기본소득을 현실 속에 도입하는 데 성공하셨던, 어떤 면에서 이번 대회 주제와 가장 밀접한 경력을 가지신 뛰어난 행정가이자 정치가이십니다. 민주당이 기본소득의 기틀을 세우고 저변을 넓혀가는데 더욱 힘써 주실 것을 부탁드리며 대회 개최를 축하하는 말씀 청해 듣도록 하겠습니다.
네, 정말로 반갑습니다. 그 이전 대회에서 배웠던 분들도 계실 텐데 참으로 반갑고 또 기본소득이 전 세계로 또 미래에서 확실한 인류의 대안 정책으로 자리 잡게 되는 좋은 계기가 되기를 바랍니다. 한때 우리는 이런 세상이 있었습니다. 삶은 각자가 책임지는 것이다. 능력이 없으면 죽을 수밖에 없다. 누구도 대신 책임지지 않는다. 그러나 언젠가 이런 대안들이 생겨났죠. 복지의 이름으로 인간의 최소한의 삶은 공동체가 책임진다. 이 복지사회가 자리 잡기에도 참으로 많은 세월이 지났습니다만 당시에는 극히 생소하고 참으로 말도 안 되는 소리라고 생각했던 이 생각이 이제는 전 세계에 일반적인 제도로 자리 잡았습니다. 우리 인류가 가지고 있는 현재 생산 능력은 점점 더 커질 것이고 최소한의 삶이 아니라 인간의 기본적인 삶을 우리 공동체가 함께 책임지는 그런 사회도 결코 멀지 않을 것이다 라고 생각합니다. 전 세계의 기본소득 연구자 그리고 활동가 여러분 정말로 반갑습니다. 더불어민주당의 대표이고 감히 대한민국 기본소득의 대표주자라고 자부하는 이재명입니다. 이렇게 든든한 전 세계의 동지들과 함께 한자리에 모이게 돼서 정말로 반갑습니다. 그리고 기쁩니다. 감히 전문가들 여러분 앞에서 제가 스스로 대표주자라고 말씀드린 것은 7년 전
Describe myself as one of the pioneers and champions of basic income
기본소득의 한
in front of all the experts of basic income because I introduced the youth basic income, which was a partial basic income scheme, in 2016 as mayor of Seoul.
청년 배당, 아동 수당,
Ever since, Korea has experimented youth basic income, child allowance, sunlight, pension, and various other pilot programs and actual policies that are based on the spirit of basic income, although not complete.
해결할 수 있는
I believe that basic income has become a mainstream policy alternative that can solve real problems in our society. Now, Korea has achieved economic growth envied by the entire world. However, in the compressed economic growth, we have been suffering from economic polarization and inequality.
양극화는
In the recent couple of years, inequality has grown wider across the globe due to the pandemic, and Korea is not an exception.
사회로
Against this backdrop, we are in need of a policy that can
최소한의 삶
guarantee the basic quality of life for all people.
있어야 합니다.
We need to guarantee people of
위원회를
humane lives and dignity.
국가가
The Democratic Party of Korea established a special committee on basic income
공공 비전을
and
연구해 왔습니다.
have been
사진이 완성될 것입니다.
working on the Basic Income Roadmap 2050.
대회가 더욱
That process will be completed very soon. That is why this year's Congress
기본소득 정책의 성과를 공유하고
seems more meaningful to me. It'll be a great opportunity to share the achievements of basic income programs across the globe and bring about
토대로
basic income as a reality.
기본소득 정책이 실현되고 기본사회를 향한
In many parts of the world,
마련되기를 기대합니다.
basic income will be introduced
적게 시작하지만
across the globe thanks to the efforts of BN.
기본소득이
Although the start will be little, the end will be great, and you will become the champions who pioneered basic income. Thank you and congratulations.
예, 일부의 마지막 순서
So that was the last
가 아닌가 생각합니다.
congratulatory remarks for part 1.
이것으로 일부의 모든
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee.
우리가 잠시 10분간 휴식을
Now, before we take a 10-minute break, we're going to take a group photo of
모든 연사분 포함 참석해 주신 여러분
all participants. I'd like to invite all participants, including the speakers, to come forward for a group photo.
그렇게 찍을 거예요? 아까 나온다고
앞으로 나와주시면 감사하겠습니다. 선생님 파레이스 파라이스 다음 프로에 진행하겠습니다. 여보세요?
Like be visible?
I don't know if we're gonna be visible. Bueno, traigo comí bien sinceros.
Korea.
全員映るように撮るわけじゃないですか。かがむとかするかと。
しゃがまないと思う。上からのままでいいかもしれない。
Okay, that's good. We are in. We are in. Yeah.
しゃべれます。
多分イ・ジェミョンさんがいらしたからそれの関係で写真撮るの。あ、ちゃんとかがめって言ってます。
人が多いんで、しゃがみ方もなかなか難しい。
地べたに座らないと。
階段状のね、あれだろう。Possible is, but yeah.
화이팅!
10分休憩。
All right. It's a good idea to start it with this actually. Or people just, huh? Never mind. No. Oh, come on. Come on. Put it.
Hello, everyone. The organizers of the Congress asked me to make a short announcement before I begin. Tomorrow, 24th of August, at 7 p.m., Taiwan Korea Youth Forum will be held here at the ECC Theater. So any of you who wants to participate, you are more than welcome. This is an important part, regardless of your age. This is a Taiwan Korean Youth Forum, but any of you who wants to participate, you can come. Okay, now we are all set to begin the second half of the Congress opening session. It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome the distinguished keynote speakers, Ms. Annie Miller and Professor Philippe van Parijs. What's so special about these two is that both are founding members of the Basic Income European Network, which is now called the Basic Income Earth Network, BN. I think they are the living proof that the distance between basic income in theory and basic income in reality is the amount of action we take and the feeling of fraternity uniting us. Let me introduce our first keynote speaker, Ms. Annie Miller. Annie was the chair of the UK Citizens Basic Income Trust for many years, and she's also an economist and an author who published many highly regarded books, the latest one being Basic Income, A Short Guide. Please welcome Annie Miller, who will be sharing her opening reflections with us. The floor is yours.
Hello, basic income delegates, both here and online. Annyeonghaseyo. What a treat to be here, such a privilege. Sorry. Shall I start again? Hello, Biang delegates, both here and online. Annyeonghaseyo. What a treat to be here, what a privilege. When I was invited to give the opening address, I wondered, what could I talk about? However, I realized that even after more than 3 decades in the business, I'm still learning new things that I can share with you. I also had the privilege of attending the first of the current wave of basic income conferences in September 1986 in Louvain-la-Neuve, Belgium, organized by the collectif Charles Fourier. I've been reflecting on how things have changed over the last 37 years. Sorry, there we are. First of all, who were we then and who are we now? 25 papers were presented in 1986, of which 4 were by women. All the presenters hailed from 10, mainly Northern European countries. All the presenters, this year, some 140 papers will be presented, including those in the plenaries, and at least 28 will be given by women, which represents a slight increase in presentations by women. Presentations are coming from, I counted 26 different countries, and every continent is represented. Now, as in 1986, the majority of presenters this year would appear still to be university academics and other researchers from independent institutes from around the world. This is probably because other people find it even more difficult to obtain funding to attend. About 50 people attended the 1986 Basic Income Conference and the General Assembly that followed, several of whom went on to organize and host subsequent Biang congresses. However, this year, we are privileged to welcome some elected representatives and others representing their political parties, in addition to literary critics, poets, and novelists, and other activists. So basic income is both worldwide and mainstream now. We are no longer merely a set of independent researchers, other academics and advocates. We are definitely a basic income movement. So, who contributes to this movement? Researchers and other academics have developed an academic structure comprising a broad base of theoretical research overlain by overlain conceptually by a layer of empirical research, mapping the subject matter of the theoretical basis. Our theoretical activists provide a very welcome third layer to the basic income movement, with the extremely important role of engaging with and persuading the general public and opinion formers, policymakers and politicians as to the desirability and feasibility of a basic income program, informing, educating, and even entertaining the grassroots with one or two of our rare basic income jokes. In fact, if you've got any jokes, can you tell them to me afterwards, because I don't know any. Thanks. Academics and activists have different skills and voice. The two communities are not only complementary, we need each other. We all would benefit from being more closely integrated, working cooperatively together to ensure that we all sing from the same song sheet. Ideally, activists would root their advocacy in this academic structure, which has been developed over recent decades. The activist could also report back to the academics when their language is so off-putting to the general public and that it makes activist work more difficult. I want to encourage our enthusiastic activists to put in the time and effort to do their homework and become better acquainted with this sound academic foundation. Not only will it give them greater authority in their advocacy, but it will also help them to avoid some of the elephantine pitfalls that are awaiting to entrap the unwary. Not doing so can undermine and even reverse their cause. The following pitfalls concern inaccurate use of terms in dialogue. I must confess that sometimes we academics are a bit lax in this respect because we're usually familiar with the context. However, members of the general public, for most of whom these ideas are new, cannot make these distinctions initially. So perhaps this plea should apply to all of us to be more rigorous about our use of terms. The definition is the keystone to the whole academic structure. Basic income is a simple concept, but difficult to define. Activists, please do not, in your enthusiasm, reinvent the wheel, or in this case, create a new definition. Please use the Biang definition provided on its website, which may not be perfect, but it is the best that we have at this time, having been most recently refined at the General Assembly here in Seoul in 2016. This simple act can help to avoid pitfall number one, the frustration that occurs when people talk at cross purposes, and the confusion that arises when people use different terms to address the same concept or use the same term for different concepts. If you need a mnemonic to remember the definition, don't think of UBI, think of PCI, UUBI. That is periodic, cash, individual-based, universal and unconditional basic income. I shall be making the case for adding a third U for uniform in my presentation in plenary number 7, in which case it might even become PCI U3BI. Excuse me. There is no set level for basic income, and the potential range is wide. Please avoid pitfall number 2 by making it clear to what sort of level of basic income you are referring when predicting their potential outcomes, in order to avoid false expectations or accusations of misrepresentation. As our colleague Toru Yamamori asks, is a penny a month a basic income? Yes, it is. but obviously it's not going to contribute much to the reduction of poverty. A common error among enthusiasts is to assume that a basic income programme can replace all existing benefits. But much depends on the level of the existing benefits and the level of the basic income payment. Even so, there is a place for other cash benefits to be introduced or retained, including differentiation benefits for people with disabilities, for instance, or for retained means-tested benefits, because basic income should be introduced gradually into an existing social assistance system, and obviously will not necessarily be enough to begin with to replace them. Also retained social insurance benefits, and especially non-mandatory ones, which were subscribed to voluntary, even state ones. And finally, benefits for which a basic income payment is not a good substitute, such as a welfare fund for providing emergency payments for fire or flood. So please avoid pitfall number 3 by not claiming that a basic income programme can replace the existing cash-based social security system. Say instead, basic income payments can be introduced alongside the existing income-tested or means-tested benefit system and either wholly or partially taken into account when entitlement is being calculated. In this way, some recipients may be floated off the means-tested benefits, but situations have occurred when claims about replacement have led to opponents of basic income programs withdrawing the whole means-tested benefits system before the basic income payments were introduced and without ensuring that there would be of sufficient amount to cover the means-tested benefits that they were supposed to be replacing. Talk of replacement opens the door to political opportunism, so please take great care. Another common pitfall, again when extolling their outcomes, is that of failing to distinguish between a basic income programme comprising only the cash payments and a basic income scheme which includes its recommended sources of finance. Some of the anticipated financial outcomes, such as a reduction in income of wealth or wealth inequality or work incentive effects, may be more dependent on the source of funding than on the basic income payments. So please avoid pitfall number 4 by always making it clear whether basic income refers to a basic income programme or a basic income scheme. A major pitfall opens up for advocates who do not understand the difference between an instrument and a policy objective. A basic income programme is not a policy objective. I repeat, a basic income programme is not a policy objective. It is an instrument which will normally lead to identifiable outcomes. However, it is a key foundational instrument which, together with other instruments, could form part of a strategy to achieve a set of carefully specified and prioritized welfare objectives. Activists can often find it difficult to understand the difference. I suspect that when most of us came across the idea of basic income initially, we conflated instrument and policy objective. I remember myself, on discovering the idea, thinking that a basic income was the end game in itself. However, further study has revealed my error. So please continue to be inspired by your vision of a transformed society, but remember, please avoid pitfall number 5. Do not confuse means and ends, and avoid using the term basic income to describe a policy objective. The objectives may be much wider than purely the basic income. They are objectives of reducing poverty, reducing income inequality, for instance. Otherwise, it creates avoidable confusion and, again, false expectations. It is often stated that a basic income programme is not a panacea for all of society's ills. We have already noted that it is not a policy objective, but an instrument. Nor can it, nor should it, replace all other cash benefits, either in type or necessarily in amount. The sources of finance also play an incredibly significant role. We should also note that cash benefits and public welfare services are not substitutes for each other, but are complementary. Cash benefits are good for accessing some kinds of satisfiers. Public welfare services are good for other types of provision. Further, while a generous basic income program could provide a transformative foundation to people's lives, it cannot do this on its own. It is not the complete answer to the question, what sort of society would we like to help to create for ourselves and future generations? A range of other supporting policies is also needed, such as for affordable housing, public transport, reduction in wealth inequality, and carbon-reducing measures, among others, together with investment in physical, technological, and social infrastructure. These would be necessary to bring about the societal changes to which many of us aspire, such as emancipation, the general well-being of the population, and a just, united, inclusive society, and a productive, flexible, efficient labour market, providing opportunities for workers. I like the insightful statement, basic income does not solve the world's problems, but it makes the other problems easier to solve. The second layer of basic income work is the growing evidence from empirical research that maps the relevant topics of the theoretical structure. Basic income research often makes use of two special types of empirical method corresponding to the basic income program's outcomes, which occur in two stages. The first stage would lead to a change in the recipient's financial situation. This would then enable the secondary, attitudinal, and behavioral changes to occur. For instance, the non-conditionality risk characteristic would allow more choice about how we spend our disposable incomes and our time. The first empirical method is that of computer-based tax and benefit microsimulation thought experiments. The second comprises basic income pilot projects. Each starts with a sample of subjects, which will typically provide social characteristics and demographic data. Each method generates a database that can be subsequently analyzed using standard statistical and other techniques. Each method has its strengths and weaknesses, but neither can predict the long-term effects of basic income systems. Excuse me. The microsimulation analysis comes logically prior to pilot projects because it explores the immediate financial effects of proposed taxation and benefit changes on disposable incomes, using data from an existing population sample. It can calculate gains and losses, identify who is affected, and how many individuals or households. From these data, it can calculate the gross and net costs of basic income schemes, reductions in poverty, and the values of income inequality measures before and after the changes. Some tax and benefit models also include the software necessary to test hypotheses about the work incentive effects of basic income schemes. The costs of developing and updating a tax and benefit model each year are not cheap, but they're much cheaper and the results are obtained much more quickly than those of basic income pilot projects. The second stage, an empirical basic income pilot project, is used to examine the attitudinal and behavioral effects that are enabled by the initial financial changes created by the basic income scheme. It should always be preceded by a tax and benefit microsimulation analysis. The pilot project creates its own primary data from its sample subjects. It can take 6 to 7 years from the initial planning of the project to the dissemination of the results. The gross costs of basic income outlays are extremely high, and it really behoves the research team to gain as much extra useful information from the project as possible for future analysis, because the marginal costs of doing so are relatively small. So, why are basic income pilot projects carried out? What are some of their objectives? Well, obviously, one of the first ones is to educate the public, but also to create publicity for the idea. But more seriously, to test hypotheses about the effects of different levels of basic income payments? And do they lead to the anticipated potential simultaneous beneficial outcomes that we predict for it? Also, it's possible to test hypotheses about the effects of basic incomes on different groups of recipients, like artists or farmers. Similarly, to test hypotheses about the effects of different sources of finance, about which we tend to be much less well informed compared with the effects of the different levels of payments. Another is to demonstrate the financial and administrative viability of basic income programs in practice, but also to dispel such myths as recipients will spend all of their basic income on alcohol and tobacco, which in fact is a symptom of dysfunctional poverty, which a generous basic income could help to dispel. But also to check for unintended consequences, such as, will a generous basic income program lead to a large number of free riders? Confusion sometimes occurs. For instance, testing whether a basic income program might lead to a reduction in full-time employment is often confused with the very different question of testing whether it might lead to a reduction in unemployment via a concept called the reservation wage, below which it is not worth an unemployed person working for pay, and about which far less is claimed. But these are two different questions, and yet sometimes they do get confused, even in researchers' minds. Now, I have a concern about some pilot projects, which I want to raise here. I have a concern about the use of a level of basic income payment in a pilot project that is obviously too high to be implemented nationally. There are natural constraints on the maximum level of basic income payment that an economy could finance, which are imposed by the income distribution of that economy. These constraints can be gauged by comparing the proposed basic income level with either income per head or GDP per head. For instance, maximum levels of 25 to 30% of GDP per head have been recommended. Although using even higher levels of basic income payments in a localized project may be good for publicity, surely the possibility of damaging the reputation of the basic income movement by raising false expectations again, leading to accusations of misrepresentation, cannot be dismissed. And I have another concern about the omission from a pilot project of any source of funding that could be implemented nationally. Surely this will give only a partial and essentially misleading picture of the effects of a basic income program. And yet there are enormous practical problems to overcome in an empirical pilot project when trying to impose a different taxation regime onto a random set of sample subjects from the rest of the population, even when the tax authorities cooperate, which isn't always forthcoming, although it might be slightly easier with a saturation site where it's the whole population who are affected. Might we gain a more accurate picture from a low-level basic income scheme introduced nationally than from limited pilot projects? I'm hoping that some experienced statisticians who've been involved in the setting up of basic income pilot projects will be able to enlighten me about these concerns. And what of our critics? Some of the most troublesome critics argue from the advantage point of complete ignorance about basic income, raising all sorts of straw men to be shot down. Those critics who have done their homework, putting in the time to study our subject so they at least know what they are talking about, deserve our respect, even if not our agreement. By the same token, it behoves us to do the same for our critics and to do our homework. Two ideological groups come to mind: right-wing neoliberals and left-wing laborists, for whom work is what gives meaning to life. What are their values, assumptions, and fears? The combination of potential simultaneous basic income scheme outputs, including community, equity, choice, and efficiency, appeals to those both on the left and on the right of the political spectrum. Basic income is neither left nor right, but forward is another quote that I like to use. The added advantage is that discussions with our critics enables us to polish our arguments more effectively. We all should be aware of polls which ask people about their preference for a minimum income guarantee. We should then challenge any claims that this is a vote for an income-tested benefit with that name, because the population might have thought that they were voting for a basic income, which could also be classified as a minimum income guarantee. And this is a very real problem, so please do be aware of it. Also, activists should be aware of vague words. An eminent British economist has written, "The problem with basic income is that it will be too small to be meaningful and too large to be affordable. It is left to the listener to interpret the non-specific words such as meaningful and affordable, which you'll notice is never defined." I think that what he meant was, the problem with basic income is that it will be too small to be meaningful to rich people and too large for them to be willing to accept the losses resulting from the required redistribution. However, basic income only needs to be meaningful to the poorer half of the population. And so what next? The world has suffered several, mainly man-made, crises in recent decades, some of the effects of which could have been lessened by a basic income. The climate emergency, leading to even more extreme weather patterns and the risk of human and other species extinction, is still the most urgent and challenging crisis to date. A world basic income scheme would help to bring about justice between nations. It could provide some security for all during the difficult times ahead, and could be part of the rich nation's reparation towards the poorer countries whose lives have been blighted by global warming. It has also been shown how a basic income scheme could act as a peacemaker between warring factions. Now is the time for activists to direct tailored messages to target audiences, especially opinion formers, policymakers, and others. And I list some of the others, but I won't list them here. The main aim of activists should be to create an informed public who, in turn, would demand a basic income programme. An informed public would not only persuade but could educate their elected representatives who will feel confident enough to argue for it in public. I'm immensely proud of the fact that in my own country, engraved on the new mace, our sword of state, in the Scottish Parliament, are 4 values to which the Scottish people aspire to for their elected representatives. They are integrity, compassion, wisdom, and justice. There are some acts and institutions that bring out the best in people. They raise up the good. I definitely think that a basic income programme is one of these. But it will only work if underpinned by a deep compassion for humanity and other species, not just for one's family and friends, but for one's neighbours and the stranger and even the enemy. We are often exhorted to love the person, even while abhorring their deeds. We should be able to look at the most despicable, wretched, or evil person and say, I may not like you or agree with your values, but I will not judge you, and I respect and care about you enough to, as a fellow human being, to want you too to have the blessing of a basic income. Lastly, I want to thank our incredible Korean hosts. Delegates from the Republic of Korea have only been involved in Bian Congresses since the year 2010. In the short time since then, you have become leaders in many aspects of basic income. You have already hosted the Bian Congress in 2016 and carried out an extensive experiment with 24-year-olds in Gyeonggi-do province in 2019 to 20. In 2021, the publication of the English edition of Basic Income for Everyone's Economic Freedom, edited by Dr. Yang Seong-yu, with contributions from 17 of Korea's most eminent specialists on basic income, shared the state of the art of basic income research in Korea with the rest of the world. An amazing range of institutions dedicated to basic income have also sprung up in Korea. This Congress has been organized by the Basic Income Korean Network and co-hosted with 4 other institutions, together with members of the local organizing committee, which comprises another 13 organizations, of which at least 8 had the term basic income in their titles. So we thank you all for this inspiring conference and look forward to your work reaping its rewards with a positive outcome of basic income in reality in the not too distant future. 감사합니다. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie, for many insightful suggestions to expand basic income into a wider society. I'm sure that the audience enjoyed the talk as much as I did. For our second keynote speaker, we are delighted to host Professor Philippe Parijs, professor at the University of Louvain in Belgium. He's also held visiting professorship at Harvard and Oxford. As a political economist and philosopher, he has done an extensive work on basic income. He has written a first book on basic income in 1995 called Real Freedom for All, and many more books afterwards. I know about Professor Parijs because my late advisor, Professor Eric Olin Wright, was also a member of the September group he mentioned in his paper. Eric embraced Professor Parijs' basic income as a crucial component of his real utopias. So I'm excited about the speech we are going to listen today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Parijs.
Okay. Okay. Right. By way of preamble, 2 things. One is I want to join Annie in the warm thanks to the extraordinary work that has been accomplished by people, by the Korean Basic Income Network and everyone else involved in the organization of this conference, and indeed of the previous Bien Congress held in Seoul. 2, I fully endorse every single recommendation that has been made by Annie before. But I'm here to share an embarrassment. How is it possible, after so many years of thinking about basic income, to still be confused about what the most fundamental justification of basic income can be? But you are going to help me. I'm going to ask you by voice to say which of these 2 values, if you call them values, should be given priority. To which do you attach most importance? You just have a few seconds to think about it. You have to choose one and only one of these 2. And I'll say 1, 2, 3, and then you'll say first for freedom, then for solidarity, and then you'll say yes. You can say it in Korean too, if you wish. Okay? Ready for it? You've chosen. So who think that of these 2, freedom should be given priority? 1, 2, 3. Yes. Who think among these 2 that solidarity should be given priority? 1, 2, 3. Yes. About equal. That won't help me much. But I thought that things were clear. Many years ago, I published, it has been mentioned, I published this book under the title Real Freedom for All, also published with a somewhat more sober cover in Korean more recently. And in that book, one of my main convictions I tried to express was that it was essential not to let freedom be appropriated and monopolized by the right. We shouldn't say the left is for equality, the right is for freedom. No, the left must be for freedom, but real freedom and real freedom for all, not only for the rich. And this was not quite expected at the beginning. This led to a systematic philosophical justification for basic income. So far, so good. But then came the pandemic. And there were, in Belgium, like in other cities, there were demonstrations against the measures that were taken by the government, forcing people to wear masks, forcing people to be confined to different forms of lockdowns, forcing people in some cases to be vaccinated. And the movement that was organizing the demonstrations against these measures was called Belgians for Freedom. I didn't join any of these demonstrations, and I felt a bit uneasy about it. How could a Belgian who wrote a book about real freedom for all not join demonstrations organized by Belgians for Freedom? Indeed, I said, true freedom. True freedom can't be very, very different from real freedom. And instead, I had some sympathy for measures being taken by the government, not all of them. Sometimes I found they were over the top, but taken by the government in the name of solidarity. We had to show solidarity for the more vulnerable people of society who could be killed, could be made ill as a result of our not wearing masks, of our not being vaccinated, and so on. And so came a difficulty. Am I then fundamentally in favor of solidarity against freedom? I had to think about it. But it turned out not to be that difficult, because when you think about it, public health policies that restrict formal freedom on grounds of solidarity can be important contributions to real freedom for all. So I just explained, if you prevent contamination thanks to a restriction of formal freedom, this may be good for people to survive, not to be sick, etc. And therefore, it can be good for their real freedom. And that also rescued, this short reasoning, rescued my case for basic income against solidarity, at least beyond solidarity, because you can say the same about the institutionalized solidarity that forms the core of the existing welfare states, the assistance components, and even more the insurance component. And you can say, well, this restricts our formal freedom because you are forced to pay contributions in order to fund it. But of course, it contributes by helping the sick, helping the unemployed, helping the elderly, and so on. It contributes to the real freedom of many. It is solidarity in the sense that it is doing for others when they are in trouble what they would also do for us if we were in trouble. Solidarity is symmetric. There is an aspect of reciprocity which is not present when you speak about charity, which is unilateral. And so the solidarity, the value of solidarity to which is being appealed in justifying our welfare states is really this notion of solidarity. So I help you because you are one of us, and because we share an identity, we are part of the same community, real or imagined. Therefore, I could have been you, and that is why I help you. It's beyond self-interest, but it's different from charity. That is solidarity. And this institutionalized solidarity is a very important part of our welfare state and can be justified in terms of real freedom. But, and that is essential, it's only a part of a desirable welfare state, of a just welfare state. And an unconditional basic income, in my view, so as developed in that book, Real Freedom for All, an even more important part of a just welfare state, of just institutions, is an unconditional basic income. Then you can see, as explained by Annie also before, and you can see then what we need to keep in terms of social assistance and social insurance as top-ups over and above this unconditional basic income. So all this So as a result of the pandemic and the little thinking I had to do about how the consistency of my view, made me inquire further about this notion of solidarity. When it was born, in fact, the term was invented in the 1840s in France. It was first used in France before spreading to other languages. And it was especially popularized at the end of the 19th century by this man called Léon Bourgeois, who also got the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize for his contribution to the creation of the League of Nations. But in his view, and in view of many other people spreading this notion of solidarity, this notion of solidarity was a sort of modernized and also gender-neutral reformulation or expression of the older notion of fraternity. Fraternity. That rang a bell and made me go back to something that happened in September 1986. September 1986 was a very special month for me, and to some degree for everyone in this room, because that's when I had tried to contact anyone I could find in the world that seemed to show some interest for something that I decided to call basic income at the time. So despite the fact that in English the most common word at the time was social dividend, in US demogrant, but I thought basic income was a more appropriate word. I gathered these people, and as has already been mentioned, that in Louvain-la-Neuve, at the beginning of September 1986, and you can see there the main actor on the scene is Annie Miller, who've just heard before. It's also the month, at the end of that month, that I wrote this letter. Yes, a letter. This was long before email, long before WhatsApp and all that. We had to write the letters at the time. And that's the letter, the end of September, in which the first definition of basic income was given, as you can see, with some at the bottom, with some resemblance with the current definition, which was then gradually improved, clarified, made more explicit, and it's also the first document in which the existence of this new network was mentioned. And so there are still a few survivors from this time, Guy, Andy, and I in this room today. But what the event to which my attention was drawn happened in between, just 2 days before I wrote this letter. And this happened in London at the annual meeting of this group called the September Group, referred to by our chair just a minute ago, a group of left-wing scholars that has been meeting annually for over 40 years now. And you can see there on the picture, in particular, Eric Olin Wright, so the mentor of our chair, is lying flat, because he's lying flat there, not because he was tired, but he was the photographer, and so he had to prepare the camera and then run, and then quickly find a place on the picture. And at the end of these meetings, each of these meetings in our young days, not now, we used to play a game. And in that year, September 1986, the game consisted in ranking values, 5 values, from the one we found most important to the one we found least important. The values were equality, fraternity, liberty, the French triad, self-realization, and efficiency. The relative majority in the group, in terms of first ranking, the relative majority was for freedom. Eric Olin Wright, perhaps surprisingly, was the only one to put equality first. Maybe that's why he lay flat, so that his head wouldn't be higher than his feet or something. So he was the egalitarian in the group, but I was the only one, and that's what has now disturbed me. I was the only one to put fraternity first, to put fraternity first. Now this was unreal. Thinking back on it was a bit embarrassing, because what I did with the book on which I was already working at the time, Real Freedom for All, was in fact what I proposed was a conception of justice that articulated freedom, equality, and efficiency. Efficiency, because real freedom for all meant really the greatest real freedom for those with least real freedom, and you have to take incentives into account, efficiency effects into account. So I tried to combine these three values: equality, liberty, efficiency. But what about fraternity? Fraternity, which I said should be ranked first. Now, you could ask, well, isn't that deeply inconsistent? Now, on reflection, I think it's not a regrettable omission not to have included fraternity in my conception of justice, for two reasons. One is that attaching importance to fraternal relations, and I must apologize for the fact that fraternal, certainly in French, is a gendered notion, so it's brotherhood, so sisterhood, but because it's meant to be, in its meaning, to be gender neutral, and I hope that the Korean translation is gender neutral, but it might not be. And so anyway, attaching importance to fraternal relations rather than a different sort of relation between people is a particular conception of the good, of what a good life is. And justice must show equal respect for different conceptions of the good. Therefore, it's not an anomaly that fraternity, the value attached to fraternal relations, which I certainly a great value I attach to it, was not included. And the second reason is that a just basic structure is a set of obligations and rights. But if you coerce fraternity, you destroy it. Fraternal relations are fraternal if they are voluntary. So for these two reasons, it was not wrong, and it's not bizarre in a way that fraternity was not included. And it is therefore very important in this whole discussion, the relationship with solidarity, and so the uncertainty we may be about it, the ambivalence as showed by the more or less equal numbers of people saying freedom is more important or solidarity is important. Very important to distinguish two notions of solidarity. There is what I call cold solidarity, which is institutionalized solidarity. And that's a component of a just basic structure, a just institutional structure. This is a set of obligations and rights, where no one is supposed to act out of solidarity there. It's just you are obliged to pay your contributions and you are entitled to some rights defined by that system. And then there is what I call warm solidarity, or spontaneous solidarity, which consists in these fraternal relations irreducible to a just structure, just legal structure. But then comes the question, yes, okay, but should fraternity from justice have priority, take priority of justice? And if so, what about a basic income, which I said could best be justified in terms of real freedom for all? So let me ask you for some more help now, okay? So here the question is somewhat different. So the question is, you have justice on the one hand, and then you have fraternity, understood as fraternal relations between people, warm relations, relations of warm solidarity. Okay, which of these two should have priority? Let's proceed in the same way. Make up your mind. You have to choose one of these two and only one. I have a few seconds. Who thinks that priority should be given to justice? 1, 2, 3. With your voice, let's start again. Who thinks priority should be given to justice? 1, 2, 3. Yes. Who thinks priority should be given to fraternity? 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay, somehow there were less voices on this issue than on the first one. Okay, but it's again quite balanced. Well, the value, what I suggest in order to get to best handle these torn sentiments we may have, is that it's important, as I said before, that fraternity should not be made of a part of justice. It's also, and there my formulation in the written document is one from which I moved already. So it's not a value that should trump justice under any circumstance. And so justice is really what should have priority. But it is a feature of a good society and of a good world that is valued by some of us over and above its possible contribution to making society more just. It's something irreducible. And so fraternity, more fraternal relations may help make our society more just, but over and above this contribution, having a society in which relations between people, having a world in which relations between people are fraternal, is something valuable in itself. What follows for basic income? If universal basic income fosters fraternal relations, this does not make universal basic income more just, because fraternity is not part of justice. But I believe that there are arguments, plausible arguments, to the effect that this would then give more motive, more motivation to fight for a basic income to those who value fraternity. And there are, I won't go in the interest of time through all 5 of these possible connections and 5 ways in which the institution of a universal basic income would contribute to the development of fraternal relations. I'll just stress the last one and then the third one. And the last one consists in saying, well, you give more real freedom to those with least real freedom. That means you fight against the time poverties suffered by many households in situations of poverty, where they have to struggle both in their work, in the work aspect of their life, but also in the consumption aspect of their life. They're constantly short of time. And so basic income gives them more real freedom and more options in their life, both in order to spare some time thereby freed in fraternal activities, or activities of spontaneous warm solidarity, but also it enables them to choose more freely among the jobs that are available for them, and to choose those jobs in which both internally among co-workers, but also in the relationship with the clients, with the suppliers, so with the users, whatever, fraternal relations, fraternity is more present. That's the point number 5. Turn to point number 3. Just that was neatly developed by our Catarina Neves, so one of our Portuguese co-fighters for basic income, but had already been presented here many years ago by a French sociologist called Alain Caillé. And he argued in favor of the unconditionality of this basic income protection, of the guaranteed income, on the grounds that it could then be framed, perceived, experienced as a gift that people receive. A basic income is not something we deserve. Let's not try to defend a basic income. That would be a trap into which we shouldn't fall by saying, oh, we deserve a basic income. We don't deserve basic income. This basic income is a gift. It's made possible by nature in part, and by the actions, the contributions of many people before us, and many people in our own society that help our society function. So basic income is not something we deserve. But that's precisely the good thing about basic income in terms of breeding, in terms of fostering fraternal relations. Because if you receive this gift, this gift calls for a counter-gift and voluntary, for something and that you'll feel you'll have to contribute to society, whatever form it may take. And Katharina herself has been doing some empirical work also, and that's one of the possible interests that pilot studies may have about what difference it makes when you have a highly conditional guaranteed minimum income versus an unconditional one in terms of the attitude, this aspect of the attitudinal effect. Let me then conclude. My initial question, which I confess I had to struggle with initially because, as I said, because during the pandemic I thought, oh, Philippe, are you on the right side here by saying not joining the Belgians for freedom and saying, no, I'm in favor of solidarity? Isn't that deeply inconsistent with your real libertarian approach to justice? Well, I managed to get out of that difficulty, and yeah, I'm finishing. And and then I got to this more serious difficulty about the priority that I felt I had to give to fraternity. So what's my answer to the question in the title? I say yes, universal basic income. I say yes to the freedom against solidarity, because a universal basic income is to be justified by appealing to real freedom. I think the best fundamental justification. There are all sorts of pragmatic justifications of basic income, but the most fundamental philosophical justification, in my view, has to be done in terms of freedom, but, as I said, real freedom, and real freedom for all, not only for the fortunate, not only for the privileged. And this is necessarily, if not against, beyond solidarity. We must not try, that's another trap, to defend basic income in terms of solidarity, because solidarity will always be conditional. You help those who happen to have bad luck, but the basic income is unconditional. It's given also to the lucky. So it has to be justified by appealing to freedom. So yes, freedom against solidarity, but no, the answer is no. If you turn to warm solidarity, because the freedom offered by a universal basic income suitably framed and both enables and motivates warm solidarity, at least if at least some of the 5 arguments I just listed before are correct. And this is then, if I know there, saying, well, freedom is not against warm solidarity. On the contrary, it's a condition for it if we can see that it implies a basic income. And this is then one more reason to advocate a basic income, at least for those, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room, at least for those who care about making relations between us in our communities of sympathy, as we saw earlier in the homage that was done, and not making these relations not only locally, but also nationally, also globally, transnationally, making these relations more fraternal for all those who care about that. Well, that's one more reason to be in favor of basic income, and more than be in favor, be enthusiastic for basic income, and spend, as so many of us have done for so many years, spend more time, more energy fighting for it and trying to get it into reality.
Thank you so much for really intriguing talk. I just learned that there is no fraternity without freedom, which sort of led me to think that without warm solidarity, our freedom may be trivial and even pointless. I'm sure that these 2 excellent speeches will inspire us and resonate throughout the Congress. So, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, and online audience, let's conclude this session by giving a massive round of applause to all speakers for the opening session. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Announcement, we need to take pictures outside of this building. So how about going out? Heavy rain. Okay, let's. So we don't need to take picture. Okay. Yeah. Saturday at the closing session, maybe. We'll see you all then. Thank you so much.
점심시간 안내 드리겠습니다. 지금부터 자유롭게 점심 식사하신 후 다음 전체 세션은 2시부터 이곳에서 진행됩니다. 편안하게 식사하시고 전체 세션 2시에 ECC 극장홀 이곳에서 만나 뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다. So this is lunchtime starting, and we will have a next session on 2 p.m. in here. So please enjoy your meal and come back here until 2 p.m. to start a next session. Thank you very much.